Hello, everyone. My name is Angie. I love to code, and I also teach kids how to code in my job. I work at a school where I teach the computer science classes to middle school. And we do some fun projects. The way I teach computer science is really by doing really fun, playful, creative projects that really blend art and design with coding. And so this is a little experiment because I've been wondering whether outside of the students that I teach, whether there are other kids or even adults who might want to do some coding together with me, right? So I'm filming this first video and then we'll see if anyone actually watches it and if anyone actually codes along with me through some of these project ideas that I have, and then we'll see where that takes us. So welcome to the first video. Maybe it'll eventually become a series, maybe not, I have no idea. I'm just calling it Coding Together, and because I like to code together with friends because it's way more fun. It's fun when you have someone to talk to, when you run into problems. It's fun when you get something working and you get to show it off. It's fun when you even code something for somebody to share, maybe to make them laugh, maybe to make them feel happy. So the way this is going to work, I'm going to make this bigger, make my little bubble smaller, is, well, first of all, I want to share with you who I was inspired by. I was actually inspired by one of my favorite artists, Wendy McNaughton. Maybe you know of her, maybe you don't. So at the start of the pandemic, she started filming videos on Instagram of drawing classes. She called it Draw Together. So you can see where coding together came from. And it's just like, a little drawing lesson. And then she has like followers and kids who are following her and then send her their drawings. And it's been a really fun way to kind of be with a community of people who like the same stuff you do, even though we're all kind of stuck in our houses together. So I'm really inspired by her. And so I'm wondering if there's also a way that we could do something similar, but with coding. Because the way I think about coding is not maybe a little different, right? Like I actually hope that, or the way I think about coding is more like how Wendy thinks about her markers and color pencils and watercolors. I just think of it as a way I can make cool stuff happen on the screen. And those cool stuff usually involves animations or fun little interactive things or just kind of artsy things that are pretty and cool. So that's where this whole came from. To be a little bit more clear, what I prefer to code in and what I teach my students at my school is JavaScript. In particular, it's JavaScript using a library called p5.js. P5.js is a really cool kind of add-on, like we can call it an add-on, it's called library for JavaScript. That's really about being creative with code. So a lot of artists use it, a lot of designers, and it's really welcoming. It's really easy to get started, and you can do some really fun things really easily. And I think we'll be able to see that later on in this video. I also really like the fact that they clearly want to make coding more inclusive and accessible to everyone. So there's a mission statement right away on the front page of their website that talks about that they, as part their community, really welcomes everybody, whatever their race, ethnicity, language, sexual orientation, gender, whatever, right? Like everyone is welcome because we all just want to be playful with code and do fun things and create neat little projects that we can share with each other. So I really like that too. The other thing I really like about p5.js is that you don't need to install anything, especially if you are a kid who maybe don't have all the kind of privileges on your computer. This makes it really easy. You just need to load up a browser, right? I think you still probably want to double check with your parents that it's okay for you to make an account on the p5.js website, but they don't collect very much information. You just need an email and a username and a password that you can remember, and that's enough to get started. So it really makes it pretty easy. Well, the kind of coding we'll be doing will be what's called text-based. So we have to type. It's not like Scratch. I love Scratch, right? Love Scratch for blocks and like you can just drag over blocks. But this is for this, so this is good for students who are ready to kind of dig it a little bit into the typing text and coding. I'm also really inspired by another YouTuber that I really like, is Dan Schiffman of the Coding Chain. So he has lots of great videos. In fact, I'm sure if you dig around, you'll find like hundreds and thousands of video tutorials about coding. So the question I'm wondering about is how many of those are made for kids or beginners? And I also have another wondering, which is how many of those are really focused on making you do projects in this kind of open-ended projects, sort of like how I teach my classes. A lot of my classes, I give students a little prompt, and then they kind of have to like write some code to respond to that prompt. There's no right answer for the prompt. The prompts are really creative and fun, and you'll get to see one of them today. And then we get to share it with each other. And then while they're writing code for their prompt, they will run into questions like, oh, how do I do this? How do I make bubbles? How do I make this thing go across the screen? And that's when I actually teach some of the concepts, because then there's a reason to learn, right? So I want to try to see if we can use a YouTube video series to do the same thing. So this YouTube series will really only work if you are following along and you ask me questions, because there will be this is going to be like a kick-off type video where I give you like, here is the project prompt for this month or this whatever period of time. And as you're working on it, if you get stuck, or if you're like, I wonder how I can do this, then I would love for you to send me a comment or a question or something. And then I can film extra videos to respond to those. So it's sort of like some of those, like if you listen to some of these podcast shows, like But Why for kids, where you send in questions and then the host of the podcast will like kind of do some research and find people to answer the questions. And then that's the next podcast episode. That's sort of like this too. So I'm definitely taking inspiration from a bunch of different people I really admire, a bunch of different shows and podcasts I really admire. So let's see how this goes. So the first thing I need you to do, if you're following along, is to create an account on P5JS. You can just come up to editor.p5js.org. The link will also be in the YouTube description. And then click sign up. So pick a username. If you are a kid who's under 13, ideally you would pick a username that isn't really related to your real name. Just for privacy purposes. Use an email, pick a password. For me, I already have an account, so I'm gonna log in. Oops. I'm gonna log in. Oh, what it'll say up here, you'll know you're logged in when it shows your name and says hello. Another fun thing you can do is if you click the little gear icon, you can change how your P5 environment looks. So the white one is the light one, there's a dark one, there's a high contrast one. What I've learned from teaching my students is that for some reason on video, the light one actually looks better. It's up to you. You're not filming video, so you can choose whichever one you want. I'm also going to change the text size a little bit. Okay, now we're all set up. So once you log in, you'll automatically get some code that you didn't write. So let's see what happens. Ooh, when you hit play, you already did something. Good job. You didn't really write any code, but your code already does something. So let's see what it's doing. So there's two things already here, two things called functions. We'll probably talk about function more later. But for now, just know that it's like kind of like a paragraph, like a thought. So what it is saying is in line 1, it says like, hey computer or P5, I'm about to create a function that I'm going to call setup. We'll ignore the little parentheses for now. They are important, so you can't skip them. And right now there's nothing in between them, so you're like, they're kind of silly, and they do feel kind of silly, but they are useful. Not right now, like we won't explain why, but maybe in a later video we'll explain why. So we're creating a function called setup, and then there's these curly braces, and if you click your mouse over it, you see how it highlights the curly braces. So it's because these two are the matching partners. So what the curly braces does in JavaScript is marking when something starts and when something ends. So in this case, it's marking the start of the setup function and the end of the setup function. So everything in between it is the instructions that are associated with the setup function. I know that was a lot of words, right? For now, just kind of listen to it and be like, okay, this is a thing that she said, and maybe it will make more sense later. What's important to know is that this Line 2 here, this create canvas, is an instruction to the computer to say, please create me a little canvas, so a little space to draw in. And I want that space to be 400 wide and 400 tall. That's what the two numbers are. 400 in terms of pixels. So 400 pixels wide, 400 pixels tall. That's why you see that little square. Then there's this function draw, right? So and again, you have function draw, you have the start of the function draw, you have the end of the function draw with the curly braces, and the only instruction in there is called background. So background is a function, is an instruction that says, hey, please clear the background on my canvas and then set it to the color 220. Color 220 is a grayscale. That's how you see this gray box. So what's interesting is these two functions, we won't make use of it in our first project, but what happens is when I hit play, the first thing that happens is whatever instructions are inside function setup, those are run. Then it goes immediately to whatever instructions are inside function draw, and those are run again and again and again and again. So what happens now is basically I hit play. Oh, the instructions by function setup says make a canvas. Okay, I'll make a canvas. Now I'm going to go to the function draw. I'm going to look for my function draw. There it is. There's one instruction in there that says clear the background and set it to gray. So I'm going to clear the background, set it to gray. But draw loops, right? Draw comes over and over. Clear the background, set it to gray. Clear the background, set it to gray. Clear the background, set it to gray. Keep going, keep going, keep going. It's kind of silly, but that's actually what it's doing. That comes in really handy later when if we end up doing animations. So, but for now, let's do some drawing. So let's start by talking about colors. So we can play with colors even with the background light. So I said 220 is a grayscale, like a gray value. If you can also give it 3 numbers, red, green, and blue. So if you give 3 numbers with commas in between, let's say 100, 0, 0, what you'll get? Some sort of red. These numbers can go from 0, right? So if it's 0, 0, 0, black. If it's the biggest it can be, which is 255, 255, 255, you get white. Hilariously, if you give some random crazy big number, it just assumes you mean 255 because it doesn't make sense to go any higher. So it's okay if you forget and you just type in some giant number, just know that it's 255 is the max. So for now, let's say I want my thing to be kind of greenish, but maybe a little bit bright. So I'm just going to randomly make up some number. So red, a little bit of red, more green, a little bit of blue. Get this nice green. That's pretty cool. Kind of like, I don't know, St. Patrick's Day or something. Okay, how do you draw, right? That's the fun part. So P5 makes it really easy for you to draw. So I'm just going to use a function called like ellipse. Ellipse means circles or ovals, right? Circle is an ellipse where the like height is the same as the width. Ellipse is or ovals are an ellipse where the height is not the same as the width, right? So if I make an ellipse, let's say a 200, 200, that's the X and the Y position. So remember our canvas is 400 by 400. So if I want it right in the middle, it's going to be 200, 200 for X and Y. Then let's say I want it to be 100 and 100 big. I should get a circle. Yay! So how do we set the color? Because a white circle, not that interesting, right? So the way you set color is a lot like how we would color in stuff in a coloring book. So if I was telling you, oh, here's a nice picture of a penguin, please color in the penguin, maybe the little bow tie of the penguin, because my penguin is fancy. And so maybe the bow tie, I want a purple bow tie. So I'm gonna go grab my purple marker or my purple colored pencil and then start coloring. Right? But you pick up the pencil first. You find your color, the right color, and you pick it up, right? So P5 is the same. You need to pick your color first before you start drawing and coloring. Right? So we're going to pick our color by using the function called, an instruction called fill. So fill again takes 3 numbers. So if I want kind of like a purple circle, let's say it's a lot of red, not very much green, and a lot of blue. Let's see what happens. Oh, it's like kind of pink. So I'm going to turn down the red a little bit. So make it more purple. Yeah, that's pretty good. So that lets me fill in. But let's say I want the outline to be something different. So that's called stroke in P5. So again, it takes 3 numbers, red, green, and blue. What should I be? Maybe orange? Let's try 200 on red, maybe 150 on yellow, and nothing on blue. Oh, I can't see that. I think it's faintly there. So let's try making it thicker. Stroke weight is what you say. And let's make it hilariously big, like 20. Funny. Right. So now I got a big kind of sun-looking thing. Let me show you one last thing before I give you your first project. Rectangles. Rect. Just like ellipse, it takes two X and Y position. So let's say I kind of want it to be right underneath it. So let's say like maybe 200 again, but maybe a little bit lower than 200. So maybe 300. And maybe I still want it to be 100 big, 100 big, 100 wide, 100 tall. Ah, that's not as good. I kind of want it to scoot it up. So I'm going to mess with the Y. Scooting it up means making that smaller. So 250. That's better, but I want to scoot it to the left now. So maybe 150 here. I'm just playing with numbers, and that's what you're going to do. Oh, this looks like a little person. But maybe I want my person to wear a different color shirt than his head. So again, I have to pick my colors, right? So I'm just going to copy these lines. But maybe instead of purple in here, maybe I'll just play around. Maybe I want a blue shirt. There we go. Pretty good. So you've just seen how to play with colors in P5, both in the background and in your shapes. You've seen how to draw some shapes. You've seen how to set the inside of the shape to be a certain color. You've seen how to set the outline of the shape to be a different color. And you've even seen how to make the outline thicker or thinner by setting the stroke weight. This is enough to release you to your first project. So my challenge for you, the project I would love for us to do coding together on, is what I assign to students actually, called coding charades. So your first step is to go and find a Pictionary generator. It's like a charade generator, but I think it's called a Pictionary generator. So you can get to the first link should be this website, which generates Pictionary prompts. We're going to use it for our purposes. So turn it up so that maybe it generates 5 things at least. You could choose the game charades or Pictionary. It doesn't really matter. You might want to turn up the difficulty level to something like hard, and then you create a list of words. So what I want you to do is generate a list of words and then pick one of those words. And then come back to P5 and try to represent that charade word or that Pictionary word by coding. I'm going to limit you too. Don't get too many shapes, right? So try to do this using only 20 or less lines of code. So in this case, I don't count the stuff that P5 already gives you. So I added 8 lines of code. So it's not very much, 20. Or I'll give you another option, 10 or less shapes. So you can either use 20 or less lines of code or 10 or less shapes. Oops. Draw a representation of your Pictionary or charade prompt. Then I would love, once you do this, right? So once you have your P5 account, make sure you save. So you can save it. If you want to change what it's called, you click the little pencil next to your name and you can say, this is my draw code together Pictionary, right? Or charades, whichever game you like. And then you can grab this URL, the one that has the funny like random letters next to it, and you can leave as a comment. I think I'm gonna post these videos on YouTube, maybe on Instagram. I would love to see what you create. And if you run into an issue or you're like, I wonder how you make this, then leave a comment too, because the idea is this is the project kickoff video. Then if there's questions, I'll film extra videos to answer those questions, because I think that's what I've learned from teaching coding, is that a lot of times the best way to learn is when you're in the middle of trying to figure something out, then you're really ready to try to figure out how to do something, versus me just telling you, here's a thing you can do in computer science, and you're like, it doesn't relate to me. The best way to learn about coding and computer science is when it's actually relevant and meaningful, because you need it for the thing you're working on. So I hope you'll join me. I hope we can do more coding together. Until next time, bye.